The world watched my millionaire daughter hand her mother-in-law the keys to a $10 million mansion, while I stood in the shadows holding a voucher for a 30-minute massage. The internet mocked me as the useless birth mother. They had no idea that this cheap piece of paper was the key to a massive medical fraud. I might be invisible now, but I will use this humiliation to burn their empire to the ground. My name is Eleanor Briggs, at 62 years old, with strands of dull silver fighting a losing battle against the fading brown in my hair. I usually blend into the background of Riverton Springs like a smudge on a window pane. I live in a second-floor walk-up where the radiator clanks like a dying engine and the smell of boiled cabbage never quite leaves the hallway. But tonight, I was not in my drafty apartment. I was standing on the manicured lawn of a $10 million estate in Silver Creek Estates, feeling like a stain on a silk dress. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ozone from the fog machines. My daughter, Olivia Briggs Hart, the tech darling of the decade, was throwing the party of the century. The mansion loomed behind us like a modern castle, all glass and sharp angles, reflecting the flashing lights of a dozen cameras. Influencers with ring lights circled the infinity pool like sharks, live streaming to hundreds of thousands of viewers. I pulled my coat tighter. It was a synthetic blend I bought on clearance 3 winters ago, and it did a poor job of hiding the scuffs on my comfortable work shoes. I was the ghost at the feast, watching my own flesh and blood ascend to royalty. And now, the moment we have all been waiting for, the MC boomed, his voice echoing over the estate. Olivia stood center stage. She looked radiant, though her smile seemed painted on. Next to her stood Margaret Hart, her mother-in-law, draped in a gown that likely cost more than my entire life's earnings. "This home," Olivia said into the microphone, her voice trembling slightly, "is a token of my immense gratitude to Margaret, the woman who truly raised me up in this industry." The crowd gasped in admiration. I felt a physical blow to my chest. I took a step forward, instinctual, but a security guard gently steered me back. I was pushed to the very edge of the frame, a blurry extra in my own daughter's life. Olivia handed over the thick leather folio containing the deed. They embraced. The cameras went wild, flashes popping like lightning. "But wait," the MC shouted, slicing through the applause. "We have not forgotten the woman who gave birth to our star, Mrs. Briggs. Please, step forward." I stumbled into the blinding light. A young assistant thrust a small cream envelope into my hand. "A 30-minute signature massage at the Lotus Spa," the MC announced, "because everyone deserves a little break." The silence lasted a heartbeat before the laughter started. It rippled through the crowd, accompanied by a few sharp whistles. "Is that it?" someone whispered loudly near the buffet. "Must have been a terrible mother." Another voice snickered. "Probably did nothing for her." My face burned. I forced the corners of my mouth up, but I knew it looked like a grimace. My hands shook as I gripped the envelope. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. But then I saw it. Margaret was hugging Olivia again, but her hand, heavy with a diamond the size of a walnut, was clamped tight on Olivia's shoulder. It looked less like an embrace and more like a restraint. The ring perfectly covered the lavalier microphone clipped to Olivia's dress. Margaret leaned in, her lips brushing Olivia's ear. "Smile." "You ungrateful little." Margaret seemed to hiss, though the microphone picked up nothing. I saw Olivia flinch. It was microscopic, a tiny widen of the eyes, a quick intake of breath. She looked terrified. Then, like a switch had been flipped, the robot returned. Olivia threw her head back and laughed, a hollow sound that did not reach her eyes. She scanned the crowd, her gaze sliding right over me as if looking at me would burn her retinas. I could not take it anymore. I turned and walked away, the sound of champagne corks popping behind me sounding like gunshots. I made it to the visitor parking lot, far away from the valets parking the Ferraris and Lamborghinis. I stood by the iron gate and looked back at the house. It glowed like a beacon of success. That was supposed to be our dream. I had scrubbed toilets and skipped meals for decades to get her to college, and now I was erased. The humiliation settled in my gut, heavy and cold. But beneath the shame, something else was kindling. Anger, pure, distilled rage. I sat down on a concrete bench near the exit. The stone seeped cold through my thin trousers, under the harsh yellow buzz of a street lamp. I opened the envelope. Inside was the voucher. 30 minutes. Valid weekdays only. I stared at it, letting the insult wash over me. Then my eyes drifted to the bottom corner. There was a tracking code printed in tiny grey font. HWF 7429B. My breath hitched. I blinked and looked again. I knew that sequence. I saw codes like that every single morning at my cleaning job, buried in the trash cans of the finance department. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. This was not just a cheap gift. This was a paper trail. The cold concrete bench beneath me faded away, replaced by the memory of a lumpy mattress in a drafty mobile home park. I closed my eyes and travelled back over 3 decades to when I was 30 years old. My husband had vanished like smoke, leaving behind a stack of unpaid bills and a toddler with eyes too big for her face. To keep a roof over our heads, I did not just work, I waged war against poverty. My days were a blur of labour that smelled of bleach and desperation. I worked the graveyard shift-stocking shelves at the discount supermarket, my fingers raw from handling frozen boxes and cardboard. When the sun came up, I drove straight to a motel off the interstate to scrub toilets and change sheets for minimum wage. By late afternoon, I was delivering greasy takeout orders in a car that rattled like a tin can. My back throbbed with a dull, constant ache, and my hands were always dry and cracked, the skin snagging on my clothes. But every time I dragged my exhausted body through the door and saw Olivia asleep with her face pressed against a library book, the pain vanished. She was my battery, my reason to breathe. Then came the financial crash of 2008. It hit us like a tidal wave. I lost my cleaning job in a single afternoon. We were days away from eviction when Olivia caught pneumonia. I remember standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway, signing medical forms that I knew would bury me in debt for the rest of my life. I sold my car my only way to get to work, just to cover the copay and buy her antibiotics. We walked everywhere after that, through rain and snow. But my baby got better. Dinner in those days was a strategic operation. We lived on 30-cent packets of instant noodles and loaves of bread with orange discount stickers. I would carefully fish out the tiny, dehydrated cubes of meat from my bowl and scoop them into hers. Mommy decided to be a vegetarian for her health, I would say, forcing a bright smile as my stomach growled. You eat it. You need to grow big and smart. And she did. I spent countless nights at the kitchen table, my eyes burning with fatigue, filling out FAFSA forms and hunting for every grant available. When the letter arrived saying she had won a full scholarship for data science, I screamed so loud the neighbours called to check on us. I remembered her graduation day clearly. I could only afford a seat in the very last row of the stadium, so high up that the people on stage looked like specks of dust. I held up a sign I had made from a recycled pizza box and glitter glue that read, "Proud Mom." When they announced Olivia Briggs, I wept. I cried until my chest hurt, not out of sadness, but because we had beaten the odds. My favourite memory, the one that haunted me now, was from a stormy Tuesday night. We were huddled together on our sofa, the one with the rip in the cushion I had covered with a towel. The wind was shaking the thin aluminum walls of our trailer. "Mom," Olivia had whispered, her head resting on my shoulder. "One day, I am going to be rich, and when I am—" She had looked up at me, her eyes fierce and promising. "I am going to buy you a house with a bathtub bigger than this whole kitchen. You will never have to scrub a floor again." I had believed her. I had believed in that promise more than I believed in God. That memory was warm and golden. But tonight, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I sat in my dim apartment, the party long over. On the scratched coffee table, I had emptied an old shoebox of photographs. There was Olivia in her oversized coat. Olivia blowing out candles on a grocery store cake. Olivia holding her diploma. Next to these treasures lay the sleek, insultingly expensive paper of the massage voucher. The two objects looked like they belonged to different universes. I stared at the girl in the photos and then at the voucher, trying to understand how the child who wanted to give me the world had turned into the woman who handed me a coupon while giving a mansion to a stranger. "What happened to you, Livy?" I whispered to the empty room. What did they do to you?" The silence of the apartment gave me no answer. Only the heavy realization that the daughter I raised might be gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. My life these days revolves around the screech of a rubber wheel against polished marble, every morning at 5 o'clock. I clock into the service entrance of Blue Summit Capital, a towering monolith of glass and steel in the heart of Riverton Springs. To the world outside, it is a prestigious financial hub. To me, it is 10 floors of trash cans to empty and fingerprints to wipe away. The contrast between the building and my body is almost funny. The hallways are sleek and futuristic, populated by 20-something analysts in suits that cost more than my car. I push my grey cart, wearing a beige uniform and a thick Velcro back brace to hold my deteriorating spine together. I am invisible here. When the heavy oak doors of the conference rooms close, ceiling deals worth millions, I am the one silently vanishing around the corner, leaving nothing but the smell of lemon disinfectant behind. Blue Summit is the engine room for half the tech startups in the city. They process medical payments and manage complex insurance packages. Their biggest client is HealNest, the healthcare app co-founded by my daughter. Nobody here knows that the woman scrubbing the toilet in the executive washroom gave birth to their star client. I keep my mouth shut. I do not want to be the poor mother trying to ride her daughter's coattails. I just keep my head down when I pass the 80-inch television in the lobby, broadcasting a news segment about Olivia. "Olivia Briggs Hart," the anchor usually says, his voice dripping with respect. The young CEO revolutionizing elder care with compassion and technology. Compassion. That word tastes bitter now. Then there is Margaret Hart. Olivia's mother-in-law is a fixture in this world. She is a wealthy widow who used to own a chain of private nursing homes before selling them for a fortune. Margaret is always camera-ready, with her cashmere shawls and a voice like warm honey. But I know the temperature of her heart. Sometimes Our paths cross when she comes to the building for board meetings. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Briggs," she always says, her tone polite but distant, like she is speaking to a confused pet. She once patted my arm, and I watched her immediately wipe her hand on her skirt, as if she was afraid the smell of bleach was contagious. It is the same dynamic when I try to visit my grandchildren. I have to stop at the guard shack of their gated community, show my ID, and wait for them to call the house for permission. Meanwhile, Margaret's black sedan glides through the gates without even slowing down, the guards practically saluting her. In my own country, in the town where I have lived my whole life, I have been demoted to a security risk while she reigns as queen. I tried to ignore the distance growing between Olivia and me. Her phone calls became rare and short, filled with corporate jargon that sounded like a foreign language. "Mom, I can't talk. We are closing a round of funding," she would say. Or, "The investors are breathing down my neck." Whenever I asked if she was happy, she would cut me off. "Don't worry, Mum. I have taken care of you. You are set." I thought she meant she was saving for my retirement. Now I know she meant something else entirely. The warning signs were there, but I was too blind to see them until the night of the mansion party brought everything into focus. I remembered a moment from 2 months ago. I was cleaning the restrooms on the executive floor during lunch. The door swung open, and I heard the click of high heels pacing the floor. It was Olivia. She was on the phone, and she was crying. I don't want to play this game anymore. Ethan. She had sobbed, her voice echoing off the tiled walls. "It's too much. If they find out," I had frozen in the stall, mop in hand, terrified to breathe. "Fine," she had screamed, followed by a shaky breath. "But if this blows up, it's on you." She had washed her face in silence and left. When I came out, the air still smelled of her expensive perfume and fear. At the time, I told myself she was just stressed about work. But now, sitting in the dark with that voucher in my hand, those overheard words replayed in my mind like a siren. Olivia was not just stressed, she was trapped. And this 30-minute massage voucher was the first loose thread in a knot I was about to untie. The party at Silver Creek Estates was not just a celebration, it was a calibrated media event. A massive backdrop glittering with gold sequins took up half the lawn, emblazoned with the trending hashtag, Grateful Daughter. Gourmet food trucks served lobster rolls and Wagyu sliders to a crowd that was more interested in taking photos of their food than eating it. A professional camera crew moved on tracks like silent predators, beaming every second of the night to a live stream that, according to the giant LED screen behind the stage, had over 200,000 viewers. I stood off to the side, near a heater that was not turned on. Olivia took the microphone. She looked stunning, but her eyes were glassy. "Margaret," she said, her voice amplified across the garden, "you are the most inspiring woman I know. You taught me that business is about family. You are the wind beneath my wings." She spoke for 10 minutes. 9 of them were about Margaret. I waited, my hands clasping and unclasping in front of my stomach. Finally, Olivia glanced briefly in my direction. "And, of course," she added quickly, "my birth mother, Eleanor, is also here tonight." That was it. 1 sentence. Before the applause could even ripple, the MC bounded onto the stage. "And now, the gift that says 1,000,000 words," he shouted. Olivia handed Margaret a heavy velvet box. Margaret opened it to reveal a set of gold keys and a deed bound in silk ribbon. The crowd roared. Margaret gasped, covering her mouth with manicured hands before throwing her arms around Olivia. "My daughter is amazing!" Margaret screamed into the microphone, tears streaming down her face that did not smudge her makeup. "I am so blessed." The camera crane swooped down, capturing their embrace. I felt a sudden surge of adrenaline when the camera turned, its dark lens focusing on me. I instinctively smoothed my hair, my heart fluttering. Maybe Olivia had saved something special for me too. Maybe not a mansion, but something that said she remembered the nights I went hungry so she could eat. "And naturally," the MC announced, his voice dropping to a patronizing register, "we have not forgotten the woman who gave birth to our star. Please, Mrs. Briggs, accept this modest but meaningful token of relaxation." A young PR assistant with a headset shoved a cream-colored envelope into my hand. I opened it, my fingers trembling. I pulled out a card, 30-minute signature massage. Below the text was the logo of a spa I could never afford to step foot in. Behind me, on the giant LED screen. The live stream chat was scrolling so fast it was a blur, but I caught the words. "Is this a joke? Mother-in-law gets a mansion. Mum gets a back rub, LOL. So embarrassing. Rolling on the floor, laughing emoji." The humiliation hit me like physical nausea. "Oh, how darling," Margaret exclaimed, leaning into the microphone. "Relaxation is exactly what old people need. Isn't that right?" Eleanor, the crowd, chuckled. It was a polite, cruel sound. They were laughing at the poor relation. I looked at Olivia. She had turned her face away from me, her hand gripping the microphone stand so hard her knuckles were white. Margaret nudged her sharply with her elbow, a movement so subtle only a mother would notice. Olivia's head snapped back up, and the smile returned instantly, plastered on like a sticker. "Yes," Olivia said, her voice tight. "We just want you to relax." "Mom?" A photographer waved at us to squeeze together as I held up the voucher next to Margaret's deed. I looked down at the paper in my hand. In the bottom corner, printed in faint grey ink, was a transaction string, Pace's Blue Summit. Auth HWF99. My breath caught in my throat. I saw that system name every single day on the discarded spreadsheets I shredded in the trash room. The rest of the night was a blur. I left as soon as the cameras turned away. I called a rideshare service because my old sedan would not have made the drive up the hill. The driver, a tired-looking man in his 40s, glanced at me in the rear-view mirror as we pulled away from the lights and music. "Some party." "Huh," he said. "You work there." "You the help." I stared out the window at the passing darkness. "Something like that." "Hope they tipped you well," he muttered. "Rich folks usually don't." I forced a dry, painful laugh. "No. They gave me a coupon." When I got back to my cold apartment, I did not take off my coat. I sat at my small kitchen table under the yellow buzz of the overhead light. I put on my reading glasses and laid the voucher flat. I traced the transaction code with a rough fingernail. This was not a gift. This was a receipt. And for the first time in years, the tired, beaten-down woman inside me went quiet, and something dangerous woke up. The next morning, the voucher sat in the pocket of my uniform like a piece of burning coal. I could feel its sharp edges through the thin fabric as I pushed my cleaning cart through the silent corridors of Blue Summit Capital. It was lunch hour, and the hive of young analysts had swarmed out to the overpriced salad bars downtown, leaving the office eerily quiet. I stopped in front of a cubicle belonging to a junior financier named Brad. He was careless, The type who left half-eaten sandwiches on his desk and, more importantly, often forgot to lock his computer. The screen was glowing, displaying a complex waterfall of transaction codes. I pretended to dust the partition, my heart hammering against my ribs, and pulled the voucher out of my pocket. I squinted at the screen. My eyes darted from the tiny code on the bottom of my massage coupon to the digital columns. WF 7429B. I knew that prefix. Over my 5 years of emptying shredders and wiping down whiteboards in the accounting department, I had learned that the HWF code was internal shorthand. It usually appeared in red text on the draft reports before being deleted from the final versions that went to the investors. It was the ghost data. I rolled my cart over to the recycling bin in the corner. My hands moved with the practiced speed of a scavenger. I fished out a handful of torn papers, realizing they were printouts from the morning meeting about the Heart Wellness Fund. I took the scraps into the supply closet and laid them out on top of a stack of paper towels. It was like a jigsaw puzzle of corruption. When I pieced 2 critical strips together, the air left my lungs. Oh my God. It can't be. I whispered to the dust moths. The document showed a transfer of funds from the Heart Wellness Fund, a non-profit charity for the elderly, directly into a shell company called Serenity Estates, and then partially routed to Heel Nest. But it was the line item halfway down the page that made my knees buckle. There was my voucher code, HWF 7429B. But next to it, under the column for service value, it did not say $50. It did not say $100. It read $25,000. I gripped the shelf to keep from sliding to the floor. The voucher was not a gift. It was a receipt. They had used my name, my identity as a beneficiary, to wash $25,000 of charitable funds out of the non-profit and into their private accounts. To the IRS, it looked like they had spent money on a service for an elderly woman. In reality, they bought me a 30-minute back rub and pocketed enough money to buy a new car. A sudden, sickening thought struck me. I pulled out my cracked smartphone and opened my health insurance app. My hands were shaking so badly I typed my password wrong twice. When I finally logged in, I scrolled through my claims history. "What is this?" I hissed, my voice trembling. I never had a full risk assessment. There were dozens of charges: mobility scooter rental, in-home cognitive therapy, advanced dietary supplement package. They are billing for things I never got, I said, the realization choking me. They are stealing from me. All those times Margaret talked about her mission to help the silver generation. She was talking about harvesting us. We were not people to them. We were livestock. And Olivia, my brilliant, beautiful daughter, had built the app that made it all possible. I heard the elevator ding down the hall. I quickly swept the torn papers into a small Ziploc bag I kept for my lunch, shoving the voucher in with them. I hid the bag deep inside my cleaning tunic, right against my chest. I walked into the employee restroom and locked the door. I leaned over the sink, splashing cold water on my face. When I looked up, the woman staring back at me was familiar, but changed. The hurt was still there, settled in the deep lines around my mouth, but the eyes were different. The soft, watery look of a mother who just wanted to be loved was gone. In its place was something sharp, cold, and calculating. "You think I am nothing?" I whispered to my reflection, my voice steady and low. "You think I am just a prop? But you forgot one thing. I clean up your mess. and I know exactly where you hide the dirt. I became a ghost in my own workplace. I clocked in 30 minutes early and stayed an hour late, turning my cleaning routine into a covert surveillance operation. I lingered in the conference rooms of the finance and legal departments, rubbing the mahogany tables until my arm ached, just so I could memorize the names of the shell companies scribbled on the whiteboards before someone erased them. Serenity Holdings, Riverton Care Partners, Blue Wave Assets. One Tuesday evening, the air on the 12th floor was heavy with the smell of stale coffee and secrets. I was polishing the glass wall of the main boardroom, moving my cloth in slow, rhythmic circles, when I saw them. The director of Blue Summit was sitting with 3 men from Heel Nest. One of them was Ethan, my son-in-law. I pressed myself against the wall near the slightly ajar door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would vibrate through the glass. "We need to optimize the cash flow from the home care program," Ethan said, his voice smooth and cold. The bundled billing structure allows us some flexibility. "Be careful with the upcoding," the director warned, tapping a pen on the table. "Medicare is sniffing around. We cannot have too many ghost visits on the books." Ghost visits. I mouthed the words silently. "If the patient has dementia." Ethan laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Does it really matter if the therapist was there for an hour or 5 minutes? They don't remember anyway. Just ensure the data from Heel Nest backs up the claim." I moved away quickly as chairs scraped against the floor. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my spray bottle. They were talking about charging for medical services that never happened. Later that night, I was emptying the recycling bin under a junior lawyer's desk when I spotted a crumpled document. I smoothed it out on top of my cart. It was a draft contract between Heart Serenity Homes LLC and a construction firm. The funding source was listed clearly, Riverton Elderly Welfare Fund. The pieces of the puzzle clicked together with a terrifying clarity. Margaret used her reputation and her old nursing home connections to access the welfare funds. Heel Nest provided the patient data to generate thousands of medical claims. Blue Summit processed the payments, mixing the dirty money with legitimate transactions to hide the trail. I dug deeper into the pile of papers and found a spreadsheet titled Home Care Trial Group. I ran my finger down the list of names, and my breath hitched. Eleanor Briggs. There I was. According to this sheet, I had received advanced cognitive decline therapy and mobility assistance 3 times a week for the past 6 months. The total cost charged to the insurance provider was over $12,000. I pulled the massage voucher from my pocket. It was not a gift. It was the anchor. I was a perfect test subject, a real elderly person with a real medical history, receiving a service that justified a transaction. The 30-minute massage was the only real thing in a mountain of lies. They had turned me into a human money laundering machine. I knew I could not just remember this. I needed proof. I pulled out my old smartphone. The screen cracked in the corner and started taking pictures of the documents, every time the elevator dinged or the HVAC system groaned. I froze, shoving the papers to the bottom of my trash bag. If they caught me, I would not just lose my job. People who stole millions of dollars did not hesitate to silence a cleaning lady. Leaving the building that night, the parking lot felt more dangerous than usual. The streetlights hummed overhead, casting long, skeletal shadows. As I walked toward my car, I heard footsteps behind me. Not the rhythmic click of heels, but the heavy, deliberate tread of boots. I fumbled for my keys, my fingers slippery with sweat. Oops. Clumsy me, I whispered loudly, pretending to drop them so I could glance over my shoulder. A man in a dark jacket was 10 feet away. He stopped abruptly when I turned, then immediately veered off toward a black SUV parked in the darkest corner of the lot. He got in, but the engine did not start. He just sat there, watching. I scrambled into my car and locked the doors, my chest heaving. As I drove out of the gate, I checked my rearview mirror. The SUV did not follow, but the fear had already settled deep in my bones. It was mixed with a fury hot enough to burn down the city. They were not just betraying me. They were building an empire on the backs of the vulnerable, using people like me as disposable bricks. And my daughter was one of the architects. I chose a small, dim coffee shop 2 blocks from the Heel Nest headquarters for our meeting. I arrived 20 minutes early, clutching my purse like a shield. Inside were the copies of the bank statements and the massage voucher. When Olivia finally walked in, she looked like a woman running a marathon in high heels. She did not hug me. She sat down, checked her watch, and placed her phone face up on the table. "Mom, I have exactly 15 minutes, she said, her eyes darting to the screen as a notification popped up. The board is in a panic over the quarterly projections. What is this emergency? I did not say a word. I simply reached into my bag and slid the papers across the scratched wooden table. The copy of the voucher lay on top, the damning transaction code circled in red ink. Next to it was the printout showing the flow of funds from the elderly charity to the shell company. Olivia picked up the voucher. Her brow furrowed. Then she saw the bank statement. Her face went pale, draining of colour so fast I thought she might faint. "I know where the money for the mansion came from." "Olivia," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "And I know that my massage was not a gift. It was a transaction to wash dirty money. You don't know what you are reading," she stammered, pushing the papers back toward me. "Finance is complicated. These are just internal transfers." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, loud enough that the barista looked up. I lowered my voice. I saw my name on a patient list for treatments I never received. That is fraud. Olivia. That is prison. Olivia stared at me, her mouth opening and closing. Then, the facade cracked. She put her head in her hands and began to weep. It was a terrifying, silent sort of crying. They made me sign it," she whispered, her voice hitching. "Margaret and Ethan. They set it all up. When I tried to back out, Margaret showed me the prenup. She showed me Ethan's old adoption files. She has lawyers. Mum. She told me if I said a word, Ethan would get full custody of the twins. She said they would paint me as the fraudster and I would never see my babies again. My heart broke for her. My little girl was being held hostage by her own marriage. I reached across the table to touch her hand. "Then we go to the police," I said firmly. "We tell the truth. I will stand with you." Olivia pulled her hand away. She wiped her eyes and looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of calculation that made my blood run cold. "No. No police," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "Listen to me. If you love me, please just let this go. I can fix this. I will pay off your debts. I will set up a private account for you. And when you get older, I will make sure you have a suite in the best heart wellness facility. You will be treated like a queen. Just burn these papers." I felt like she had slapped me across the face. She was not asking for forgiveness. She was offering me a bribe. And the bribe was a room in the very system that was stealing from people just like me. "You want to buy my silence?" I asked, the hurt making it hard to breathe. "You want to put me in one of those homes, the ones paid for by stealing from sick old people?" "It is the only way." "Mom," she hissed, leaning forward. "Do you want to destroy my life? Do you want to destroy your grandchildren's future?" I stood up, my legs feeling heavy as lead. I looked down at the daughter I had sacrificed everything for, and I realized I did not know her anymore. "I would rather die in my moldy apartment," I said, my voice shaking with rage, "than spend one single day in a cage built by the Hart family. And I would rather see you poor and honest than rich and rotten." Olivia's face hardened. The tears vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of ice. She sat up straight, smoothing her blazer. You just don't understand how the world works," she whispered, her tone dripping with pity and venom. "Go home." Eleanor. She did not call me Mom. 2 days later, I was called into the Human Resources office at Blue Summit. The manager did not look me in the eye. He handed me a termination notice. "We have detected a security breach involving your keycard access to restricted areas." He droned. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately. No severance." They knew. Olivia had told them. I walked out of the building with my box of personal items, feeling the cold wind cut through my thin coat. When I tried to call Olivia, it went straight to voicemail. Then the messages started coming. My Facebook, which I rarely used, was flooded with notifications. Unknown accounts were leaving comments on my profile picture. "Ungrateful old hag, jealous of your own daughter, gold digger." I sat alone in my kitchen that night. The only sound was the refrigerator humming in the corner. I had no job. I had no family. I had been erased from my daughter's life and painted as a villain to the public. But as I sat there in the dark, listening to the silence, I realized I had nothing left to lose, and that made me the most dangerous person in their world. The math was simple and cruel. I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of crumpled bills. After paying rent, I had exactly $240 to last the entire month. I looked at the orange prescription bottles lined up like little soldiers on the counter. My arthritis medication and my insulin. I can probably skip the pain pills on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I whispered to the empty room, my voice cracking. And if I eat less, the insulin will stretch. It was a gamble with my life, but I had no other chips to play. The next morning, I took my stack of stolen evidence to a free legal aid clinic in a strip mall. The lawyer was a tired man with coffee stains on his tie. He flipped through the papers for less than 2 minutes before sliding them back to me. "Look, Mrs. Briggs," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "This is a massive corporation. They have armies of lawyers. If I touch this, they will bury me in paperwork before I can even file a motion. You are talking about fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy? This is too big. You should focus on keeping your head down." I walked out into the grey afternoon, feeling smaller than ever. That evening, the teenage girl from next door knocked on my door. She held up her phone, her face twisted in a mix of pity and excitement. "Mrs. Briggs, you need to see this," she said. "It is all over TikTok." I watched the screen. It was a clip from the party. The moment I accepted the voucher had been edited on a loop. Someone had added a cartoon sound effect, a sad trombone, every time I smiled. The caption read, "When you are the side chick of the family." It had 3 million views. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. But then, I forced myself to scroll through the comments. They were a sea of laughing emojis and cruel jokes, until my finger stopped on one. User Nina. The truth. Comment. Does anyone else think this is weird? The mother-in-law gets a mansion and the birth mom gets a coupon. This smells like a PR cover-up. What are they hiding? My heart skipped a beat. Someone saw me. 3 days later, my phone rang. The number was unknown. Mrs. Briggs, a young male voice, asked, "My name is Jordan Reyes. I work for the Senior Justice Initiative. I saw the video, and I read Nina Cole's comment. We think there is more to your story. Can we talk?" I let them into my apartment the next day. Jordan was young, with sharp eyes and a worn-out briefcase. With him was Nina, the journalist, who looked around my shabby living room with a sympathetic nod. I hesitated for a moment, the fear of Margaret's threats still echoing in my mind. But then I looked at Jordan's folder. It was thick with papers. "You are not the only one. Eleanor," Jordan said softly. "We have been tracking billing irregularities at Heart Wellness for a year. But we never had the smoking gun. We never had someone on the inside." I went to my bedroom and retrieved the Ziploc bag. I laid the massage voucher and the stolen bank statements on the coffee table. Jordan picked up the voucher. He pulled out a magnifying glass and compared the code on the corner to a document in his file. "Matches," he said, looking at Nina. "It is the same laundering structure as the pharmacy case in Ohio. They are using microtransactions with verified patients to validate massive fraudulent transfers. This is it." "Eleanor," Nina said, leaning forward, her voice intense. "This is the evidence we need to blow the lid off. I have a podcast with a national audience. If you come on, if you tell your story, the feds will have to listen." I pulled back, my hands shaking. If I do that, Olivia will be destroyed. She signed the papers. She is the face of the company. She is also an accomplice. Nina said gently, "I am sorry, but that is the truth. I asked them to leave so I could think." I sat in my armchair as the sun went down, paralyzed by the choice. Save my daughter, or save the truth. Late that night, I was scrolling through the local news on my phone when a headline caught my eye. "Local senior dies after medication denial." I clicked the link. The photo showed a 79-year-old man named Arthur Evans. He had died of a stroke because his insurance claimed he had exceeded his annual benefit cap and refused to cover his blood thinners. I froze. I knew that name. I ran to my pile of stolen papers and frantically flipped through the home care trial group list. There it was, right above my own name. Arthur Evans. They had billed thousands of dollars of fake therapy to his account, maxing out his insurance limit so that when he actually needed life-saving medicine, there was no money left. Margaret's mansion was not just bought with stolen money, it was bought with Arthur's life. A cold calm settled over me. I looked at the picture of Olivia on my mantelpiece, taken when she was 6 years old and missing her front teeth. I loved her more than my own life, but the woman running Heel Nest was not that little girl anymore. She was part of a machine that was killing people. I picked up my phone and dialed Jordan's number. It was 2 a.m, but he picked up on the first ring. "I'll do it," I said into the darkness. I have to do it, even if it means losing her forever. "We cannot just sue them," Jordan said, pacing the small length of my living room floor. If we file a quiet lawsuit, the Hart family lawyers will bury us in motions for 10 years. They will seal the records. They will pay a settlement that looks like pocket change to them. And the killing machine will keep running. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes dark with the weight of what he was asking. We need a spectacle. Eleanor. We need to force the federal agencies to step in because the public outcry is too loud to ignore. Nina looked up from her laptop, where she had been researching Margaret's schedule. I have the perfect stage, she said, turning the screen toward us. Next Saturday. The grand opening of the Hart Serenity Mansion. Margaret is announcing a new Platinum Fund for senior care. Every major news outlet in the state will be there. My stomach churned at the thought of facing them again, but I nodded. We hatched a plan that felt less like a legal strategy and more like a bank heist. I was the Trojan horse. I sat down at my computer and typed an email to Olivia. It was the hardest thing I had ever written. I had to swallow my pride and pretend to be the beaten dog they wanted me to be. I wrote that I was tired of being angry, that I wanted to make peace, and that I was grateful for the massage voucher because I knew she meant well. I asked if I could come to the ceremony to support her. The reply came in less than 10 minutes. Olivia did not call. Her assistant did. Mrs. Briggs, the chirpy voice said. Olivia is so relieved. The PR team thinks this is a wonderful opportunity for a rehabilitation of the family image. They want you on stage. Just 2 minutes. A story about gratitude. I will do it, I said, my voice flat. While I memorized the sickly sweet script, the PR team emailed me. Jordan was working the phones. He contacted a federal financial agent he trusted, a man who had been trying to nail the Hart Empire for tax evasion but lacked the smoking gun. He is in, Jordan told me, hanging up the phone. He will have a team in the perimeter. But they cannot move unless we give them probable cause in real time. You have to show the proof live. If you falter, if they cut the mic before you get it out, we are finished. We spent the next 2 days building a bomb, but instead of gunpowder, it was made of data. Nina scanned every bank statement, every crumpled email I had fished from the trash, and the high-resolution photo of the voucher code. She compiled it into a massive encrypted file. I have set up a dead man's switch, Nina explained, pointing to a countdown timer on her screen. I am sending this link to 50 major news desks, including the New York Times. It is password protected. The moment you step on that stage, I will text the password to all of them. Even if they tackle you, the truth goes out. The night before the ceremony. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror. I practiced my real speech, the one I had written on the back of a grocery receipt. I forced myself to stand up straight, ignoring the grinding pain in my lower back. I had to look strong. I had to look like a woman who could bring down a giant. I sat on the edge of my bed and wrote a letter to Olivia. I did not intend to mail it. I folded it into a small square. I am not doing this to hurt you. Livy, I wrote. I am doing this to kill the monster that swallowed my daughter. I hope one day the girl who wanted to buy me a house comes back. I put the note in the pocket of my blazer. On the morning of the ceremony, I dressed with the precision of a soldier putting on armor. I chose my best dress, a navy blue one that had survived 10 years of wear. But on my feet, I did not wear heels. I laced up my comfortable white sneakers. If things went wrong, I needed to be able to run. I took the massage voucher, now wrapped in a protective plastic bag. and tucked it into my deep coat pocket. Next to it, I placed a small, fading photograph of my own mother. "Do not let anyone put a price tag on your dignity," she used to tell me. A black town car sent by the Hart family arrived at 8 in the morning. I sank into the leather seat, watching the familiar streets of Riverton Springs blur past. As we approached the mansion, I saw the banner draped across the massive iron gates, caring for the elderly with heart and technology. I stared at the slogan, my hand gripping the voucher in my pocket until my knuckles turned white. It was a beautiful lie, printed on expensive silk. I took a deep breath, ready to tear it down. The inauguration of the Hart Serenity Mansion was a masterclass in deception. A drone buzzed overhead, capturing the manicured lawns and the sparkling infinity pool for the local news. Margaret paraded Olivia and Ethan through the garden, stopping every few feet to point out a marble statue or a rare imported tree while the cameras flashed. I sat in the front row, sandwiched between two wealthy donors who smelled of expensive cologne. The MC introduced me as the living proof of the Hart family's generosity, the mother whose future was secured by their benevolent system. And now, the MC boomed, gesturing toward the stage. "We invite our inspirational witness to share a few words. Please welcome Eleanor Briggs." Margaret appeared at my side to escort me up the stairs. As we walked, she placed her hand on the small of my back. To the audience, it looked like a gesture of support. To me, it felt like the barrel of a gun. "Stick to the script. Eleanor," she whispered, her voice low and dangerous. "Don, don't make me regret letting you see your grandchildren." I stood at the podium. The microphone was cold against my hand. I looked down at the paper the PR team had printed for me, filled with words about gratitude and visionary leadership. Then I looked at the crowd. I saw the faces of the wealthy investors, the politicians, and the journalists. I reached into my pocket, but I did not pull out my reading glasses. I folded the speech and shoved it deep into my pocket. I pulled out a different piece of paper. My hand trembled, but my voice did not. 30 years ago, I said into the silence, my daughter slept on a sofa with a broken spring. She promised me that one day she would buy me a house. I saw Margaret's smile freeze. Olivia took a half step forward, confusion clouding her face. "This," I said, raising the crinkled massage voucher high in the air, "is the only house I received. 30 minutes on a massage table." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd. "But this piece of paper," I continued, my voice rising, "cost the taxpayers $25,000. Money that was stolen from the care of elderly patients just like me." "Cut the mic," Ethan screamed from the side of the stage. "Cut it now." But it was too late, behind me. The massive LED screen that displayed the Hart Serenity logo flickered. Nina and her team had executed the command. The logo vanished, replaced by a blown-up image of my voucher. Then came the bank statements, then the emails. The flow of money from the senior charity fund to the shell companies was projected in high definition, 50 feet tall. The crowd gasped. It was a collective sound of shock that sucked the air out of the garden. Olivia rushed toward me, her heels clicking frantically on the stage. She reached for the microphone. "Mom, stop," she cried, panic wild in her eyes. "You are ruining everything." I turned to her. I did not pull away. I looked straight into the eyes of the child I had raised on instant noodles and hope. "You can hate me for this," I said. My voice amplified over the chaos. but I would rather have you hate me than let you live the rest of your life as a criminal." Before she could answer, the wail of sirens pierced the air. It was not one car, it was a cavalcade. Federal agents in windbreakers poured through the iron gates, flanked by local police. "Federal agents," a voice boomed over a bullhorn. Nobody move. The live stream was still running. The world watched as Margaret Hart tried to maintain her composure, only to have her hands pulled behind her back and cuffed. Ethan was shouting obscenities, demanding to know who had set them up. An agent approached Olivia. She stood frozen, her face draining of all colour. She looked at Margaret being led away, then at Ethan, and finally at me. Tears streamed down her face. She did not run to me. She simply closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded to the agent. She held out her hands for the cuffs. She was finally accepting the consequences. 6 months later, the class action lawsuit filed on behalf of hundreds of elderly victims was settled. The Hart empire was dismantled brick by brick. I received a significant whistleblower reward, along with damages for the fraudulent billing in my name. The court offered to liquidate the mansion and give me a share of the property title as symbolic restitution. I refused. I do not want to live in a house built on the tears of old people. I told the judge. I bought a small, one-story bungalow on the edge of Riverton. It had yellow siding and a porch where I could watch the rain. On my first night in the new house, the sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow across my kitchen table. I had taped the old photos of Olivia and me back on the refrigerator. On the table sat the massage voucher, now cut cleanly in two, resting next to the deed to my new home. I sat in my old armchair, the one I had dragged from apartment to apartment for 20 years. I took a deep breath. My back still ached, and my knees were stiff. But for the first time in my life, the weight on my shoulders was gone. I had lost the daughter I once knew, but I had saved her soul from being completely devoured, and I had proven that an old woman with a cheap coupon could bring down a kingdom. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let's chat. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help get this story out to more people.